Physics is the only absolute law in the universe. It does not care about your bloodline, your gods, or the amount of gold plating on your hull. When a 20-ton tungsten rod strikes a stationary object at 4% the speed of light, the kinetic energy transfer does not negotiate. It does not offer terms of surrender. It simply translates matter into heat and light with the efficiency of a collapsing star. There was no sound when the Valari flagship died. One moment, it was a golden cathedral drifting in the void, a testament to 10,000 years of arrogant craftsmanship. The next, the center of the vessel simply ceased to exist. The impact turned the hull into superheated vapor so violently that the shock waves shattered the two escort frigates flanking it. It was a brutal, ugly smear of destruction against the clean darkness of space. But before the silence, there was the scream. 45 minutes earlier, radar technician Elias Miller was fighting the urge to sleep. The Aegis anchor was not a posting for glory seekers. It was a glorified parking garage located at the stable Lagrange point between Jupiter and the Sun, a massive hexagonal slab of gray plasteel and gunmetal that served as the primary shipyard for the inner system. It smelled of recycled air, ozone, and the faint copper tang of industrial lubricant. It was ugly, brutalist, and covered in scaffolding that made it look like a half-finished brick floating in the dark. Miller blinked, his eyes gritty. The proximity sensors, usually rhythmic and dull, suddenly shrieked. It wasn't a glitch. The main display, a wall of glass spanning the command deck, lit up with contacts. They warped in like a tear in the fabric of reality. The Valari Dominion fleet did not look like machines of war. They looked like jewelry. 50 capital ships. Their hulls sweeping curves of gold and pearlescent white drifted into formation. They caught the distant light of the sun and flared with a brilliance that hurt the eyes. They were aesthetically perfect. They were designed to intimidate not through fear, but through sheer, overwhelming superiority. To the Aegis anchor, they looked like gods descending to judge a colony of termites. Miller's stomach turned to ice. He watched the telemetry data. The Dominion fleet was moving fast, burning hard toward the station's gravity well. They were not hailing. They were not slowing down. And they were not alone in the corridor. The UNS Nightingale, a bulky, white-painted hospital transport marked with the universal red crescent, was drifting in the outbound lane, waiting for clearance to jump. It was a heavy, slow beast, filled with refugees and the wounded from the mining accidents on Europa. Miller saw the trajectory lines cross on his screen. The Valari flagship, a behemoth 3 times the size of the Aegis, was on a collision course. Move, Miller thought, his hands gripping the edge of his console until his knuckles turned white. Turn. Please turn. The Valari ship did not deviate by a single degree. It did not waste energy on avoidance maneuvers for something so insignificant. The golden prow of the alien dreadnought clipped the starboard engine nacelle of the Nightingale. It was a casual, dismissive gesture, like a man brushing a gnat from his lapel. On the screen, the Nightingale spun violently. The structural integrity failed instantly. The hull buckled and then tore open. Atmosphere vented into the vacuum in a glittering cloud of crystallized oxygen and frozen bodies. One moment, 3,000 souls were waiting to go home. The next, they were debris. The bridge of the Aegis anchor went dead silent. There were no screams. The horror was too absolute for noise. Every officer, every tech, every rating froze, their minds unable to process the casual cruelty they had just witnessed. At the center of the command deck, Admiral James Vance stood by the tactical table. He was a relic of a man, skin like crinkled parchment, wearing a uniform that had been out of regulation for a decade. He held a ceramic coffee mug in one hand. He watched the cloud of debris that used to be the Nightingale drift past the main viewport. Vance did not shout. He did not slam his fist on the table. He simply set his mug down on the metal console. Clack! The sound rang through the bridge like a gunshot. It broke the paralysis. "Sir," comms officer Halloway stammered, her voice thick and wet. We are being hailed. Wideband frequency. It's the flagship." "Put it on," Vance said. His voice was a low rumble, devoid of inflection. The main screen flickered, replacing the image of the slaughtered hospital ship with the face of High Imperator Kael'thas. The alien was terrifyingly beautiful. His skin was the color of polished bronze, his eyes glowing with a soft, violet luminescence. He wore robes that looked like woven light. He looked into the camera, not at Vance, but at his own reflection in the lens, checking his perfection. "Creatures of dirt and water," Kael'thas said. His voice was melodic, synthesized to perfection by the translator, but the sneer was universal. "Your silence is the silence of the grave. You clutter the void with your ugliness." The Imperator paused, waiting for the humans to wail. He expected begging. He expected them to prostrate themselves over the loss of their little medical boat. "We are the chosen of the stars," Kael'thas continued, gesturing lazily with a long, slender hand. "You occupy a gate that belongs to your betters. Kneel, and we may grant you the honor of servitude in our minds. Refuse, and we will glass your cradle. You have 1 standard hour to power down your defenses and prepare for boarding." The screen went black, leaving the image of the drifting wreckage of the Nightingale as the only view. The bridge crew looked to Vance. Panic began to set in. Holloway was hyperventilating, her chest heaving. The tactical officer was sweating, his eyes darting between the 50 golden warships and the single ugly block of the Aegis anchor. They were outgunned 50-1. Their shields were industrial grade, meant to deflect micrometeoroids, not plasma lances. Vance ignored them all. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a cigar. It was strictly against station protocol, a fire hazard in a pressurized environment. No one said a word. He bit the end off and spat it onto the deck. The flare of the match was shockingly bright in the dim emergency lighting. "Detailed scans," Vance said, smoke curling from his lips, filling the recycled air with the acrid scent of cheap tobacco. "Sir?" Holloway asked, her voice trembling. "I want detailed scans on their shield modulation," Vance said, checking his wristwatch. He looked at a small, obscure monitor on his console. It displayed a power output reading for a system that wasn't listed in the station's public schematics. The bar was red, slowly climbing toward a green line. 80%. "Sir, they just destroyed the Nightingale," the tactical officer shouted, his composure cracking. "We need to evacuate. We need to launch the escape pods. We can't fight them. We're a shipyard, not a fortress." Vance looked up. His eyes were hard, flat stones. He didn't look like a man facing extinction. He looked like a man who had finally found an excuse to do something he had wanted to do for a very long time. "Sit down, Lieutenant," Vance said. The volume didn't rise, but the command slammed the officer back into his seat. The admiral turned back to the viewport, watching the golden ships maneuver into firing positions. They were grand. They were arrogant. They were positioning themselves in a tight ceremonial formation, maximizing their visual impact, completely disregarding tactical spacing. They thought they were dealing with savages who had barely figured out fusion. "They assume we're quiet because we're afraid," Vance murmured to himself, watching the charge indicator tick to 85%. He took a long drag of the cigar, the cherry glowing red in the reflection of the glass. Let them think it. The hour bled away, minute by agonizing minute. On the main screen, the Valari fleet remained motionless, a golden noose tightening around the station's neck. They were waiting for the beg. They wanted the humans to weep, to open the airlocks and prostrate themselves in the vacuum. On the bridge of the Aegis anchor, the air was heavy and hot. The climate control systems had been rerouted to heat sinks 20 minutes ago, leaving the crew sweating in their uniforms. The smell of fear was sharp. Sour sweat and adrenaline. 99%, Vance whispered. The ash from his cigar fell onto the pristine console. He didn't brush it away. The timer on the overhead display hit "Werno." High Imperator Kael'thas reappeared on the screen. He looked bored. His glowing eyes narrowed as he surveyed the bridge crew, who were still standing, still silent, and distinctly not kneeling. "Disappointing," Kael'thas sighed. "I expected you to value your lives. It seems you are defective as well as primitive. Target the command spire. Burn it out." The golden ships flared. Their weapon ports opened, revealing throbbing cores of violet plasma. "Now," Vance said. He didn't shout. He pressed a single, plastic-guarded button on his console. The Aegis anchor screamed. It wasn't a vocal sound. It was the tortured shriek of metal under impossible stress. Along the 6-mile length of the station's central spine, 200 emergency vents blew simultaneously. Massive plumes of superheated coolant steam blasted into the void, shrouding the station in a thick, turbulent nebula. The Volari sensors went blind. They were looking for energy shields powering down, for surrender codes. Instead, they got a thermal bloom the size of a small moon. Kael'thas recoiled on the screen, his perfect composure cracking. "What is this? Is your machine dying, human?" Vance leaned forward. The smoke from his cigar drifted across the camera lens. "We had a visitor about a century ago," Vance said. His voice was conversational, the tone of a man explaining a difficult concept to a slow child. "A ship not unlike yours. Crashed in a desert. You people think we just studied it. You think we looked at the stars and felt small." The station shuddered. A deep, rhythmic thrum, thrum, thrum began to vibrate through the deck plates, shaking the teeth of every crew member. It was the sound of magnetic coils the size of skyscrapers waking up. "We didn't feel small," Vance continued. "We felt insulted. We realized the galaxy's apex predators were fragile. You rely on shields. You rely on energy weapons that can be dispersed. You forgot the old ways. What are you babbling about?" Kael'thas spat, his hand raising to give the firing order. "Humans are tool users, Imperator." Vance's eyes were cold. "When we find a rock, we sharpen it. And when you destroyed that hospital ship, you took the safety catch off." The steam cloud around the Aegis dissipated, blown away by the magnetic pressure wave. The station had changed. The scaffolding had retracted. The central spire was no longer a shipyard dock. It was a barrel. A 6-mile-long magnetic railgun charged with the power output of a small sun. Inside the breach, a 20-ton tungsten rod, stripped of all guidance chips and electronics, floated in a magnetic suspension field. It was a dumb round. No computer to hack, no frequency to jam, just a dense metal slug and the laws of motion. "Fire," Vance said. The Volari fired first. Beams of violet plasma lashed out from the Golden Armada, slamming into the Aegis. But the humans hadn't built their shields for elegance. They had built them for impact. The station's reverse-engineered barriers flared a thick, angry blue, absorbing the heat and dissipating it into the station's massive thermal sinks. The lights on the bridge flickered, but the hull held. The station was a tank designed to take a beating, not a dancer designed to avoid it. Then the Aegis answered. There was no laser flash. There was no whining charge-up sound in the vacuum. There was only physics. The tungsten rod exited the barrel at 4% the speed of light. To the human eye, it was invisible. To the sensors, it was a glitch. The rod crossed the distance between the station and the Volari flagship in a fraction of a heartbeat. It struck the center of the golden dreadnought. Kinetic energy is a cruel master. The rod didn't detonate, it transferred momentum. The impact point instantly liquefied. The atmosphere inside the alien ship compressed until it underwent nuclear fusion. The flagship didn't break apart. It atomized. 1 second, Kael'thas was sneering on the screen. The next, the transmission cut to static as his ship was erased from existence. The shockwave was a physical wall of force. The 2 escort cruisers flanking the flagship were caught in the expanding sphere of superheated gas and debris. Their delicate, sweeping hulls crumpled like tinfoil. Gold plating shattered into millions of lethal shrapnel flecks, stripping the shields off the ships behind them. Thump. The Aegis fired again. Thump. And again. The reload cycle was mechanical and terrifyingly fast. Another rod, another erasure. On the bridge of the Volari sub-commander's vessel, the scene was absolute bedlam. Alarms were singing songs of impossible destruction. "It's not energy," the sub-commander screamed, his voice cracking as he watched the flagship turn into a nebula of gold dust. "Shields are ineffective. They are throwing rocks. Take evasive action." They couldn't. The Volari fleet was in a tight ceremonial formation, designed to look imposing, not to fight. They were packed together like sardines in a tin. When they tried to turn, they collided. Engines flared, burning into the hulls of friendly ships. The Aegis anchor kept firing. It was methodical. It was the rhythmic beating of a drum. Every 3 seconds, another ship vanished. The tungsten rods punched through shields as if they were mist, coring the alien vessels from bow to stern. The psychological horror of it broke the Dominion fleet. They had conquered star systems with fear. They had never seen a weapon that didn't glow, didn't hum, and couldn't be stopped. They were being beaten to death with a club. Vance watched the slaughter, his face illuminated by the strobe light flashes of dying ships. He didn't smile. He checked his watch again. "Signal the fleet," he said. "Time to clean up." From the dark side of the station, and from the deep shadow of Jupiter behind them, space seemed to shimmer. The optical camouflage dropped. The Terran heavy fleet didn't look like the Valari ships. They were ugly. They were boxes of black armor plate, bristling with railgun turrets and missile pods. They had been sitting there for hours, silent, cold, watching the Nightingale die. Now, they were hungry. 200 human destroyers burned hard toward the confused, shattering remnants of the Golden Armada. "Sir Isaac Newton is the deadliest son of a bitch in space," Vance murmured, crushing the stump of his cigar into the console. Fire at will. It wasn't a battle. Battles implied two sides with a statistical chance of victory. This was an extermination. The Terran destroyers didn't bother with formations. They swarmed. They were ugly, boxy things welded together in orbital dry docks with no concern for aerodynamics or aesthetics, only firing arcs. They poured point defense fire into the blinded, flailing remnants of the Valari fleet. The golden ships, once the envy of the sector, were reduced to drifting scrap. The Valari crews, panic-blind and terrified, tried to modulate their shields, tried to hail their gods, tried to run, but the human targeting computers were relentless. Every time a Valari engine flared to flee, a railgun slug gutted it. Vance watched the tactical plot from the bridge of the Aegis anchor. The red dots on the screen were blinking out, one by one. The vibration in the deck plates had stopped, replaced by the dull, distant thuds of secondary explosions rippling through the debris field. "Cease fire," Vance said. The order relayed through the fleet. The railguns fell silent. The missiles stopped flying. The space around the station was a glittering fog of gold dust, frozen atmosphere, and twisted metal. It sparkled beautifully in the light of the distant sun. It was a graveyard of 50,000 souls, created in less than 12 minutes. "Scan for survivors," Vance ordered. Only one signal returned. A small Valari frigate, its engines sheared off by a glancing blow, drifted near the edge of the kill zone. It was dead in the water, leaking atmosphere, its golden hull scorched black. "Open a channel," Vance said. The screen flickered to life. The face that appeared was not the arrogant, glowing visage of a high imperator. It was a junior officer, gold skin pale, violet eyes wide and wet. He was on his knees, surrounded by sparks in the bodies of his bridge crew. He was hyperventilating, making high, keen sounds of absolute terror. He looked at Vance and then he looked away, unable to meet the eyes of the monster on the screen. Vance didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He felt a heavy, leaden weight in his gut. It wasn't guilt. He had buried that emotion years ago. But it was the exhaustion of a man who knows that the cleaning up is always harder than the killing. "Look at me," Vance said. The alien officer flinched, forcing his head up. "I am leaving you alive," Vance said, his voice flat. "Not because of mercy, but because I need a mailman." The alien blinked, trembling. "You are going to go back to your council," Vance continued. "You are going to tell them what happened here. You are going to tell them that the apes have iron, and you are to tell them that if they ever touch one of our sick again, we will not stop at the ships. We will come for the worlds." Vance cut the feed. "Let him go," he told the tactical officer, "and reload the main gun." The Terran fleet parted, creating a path through the wreckage. The crippled frigate limped away, engaging its emergency drive. It fled into the dark, carrying a ghost story that would haunt the Valari Dominion for 10 generations. 1 year later, the observation deck of the Aegis anchor was quiet. The station had grown. New scaffolding choked the view, expanding the hull, adding more docks, more railguns, more armor. Admiral Vance stood by the reinforced glass, staring out at the void. He was retired now. The uniform was gone, replaced by civilian fatigues that hung loose on his gaunt frame. He held a cup of coffee, but he didn't drink it. Below, in the primary cradle, the UNS Nightingale II was preparing for launch. It was twice the size of its predecessor, escorted by 4 heavy destroyers. The door to the deck hissed open. A young lieutenant stepped in, stiffening when he saw the old man. "Sir," the lieutenant said, "the Velari delegation has arrived. They are early. They've been waiting in the airlock for 2 hours. They refused to sit until we gave them permission." Vance nodded slowly. They learned. The galaxy had changed. The trade routes were open. The piracy rates had dropped to 0. No one intercepted human ships anymore. When a Terran vessel entered a system, the local chatter died. Other species didn't look at humans with curiosity or disdain anymore. They looked at them with the wide, unblinking stare of a prey animal watching a wolf walk through the room. Vance looked back at the Nightingale too. It was safe. Humanity was safe. The Pax Tyranna had begun, built on a foundation of 20-ton tungsten rods and the ashes of the Golden Fleet. But as Vance watched the hospital ship burn its engines and drift away, he didn't feel pride. He felt a cold knot in his chest that wouldn't loosen. They had won. They had proven they were the apex predators. But in the reflection of the glass, Vance saw his own face, old, gray, and hard. He realized that the galaxy didn't respect them. It didn't trust them. It feared them. We were the monsters in the dark now, Vance thought, taking a sip of the cold coffee. And the worst part was, he liked the quiet.